5 years. That's how long a man accused of gunning someone down on a quiet Hamden, Connecticut street was able to live his life 2 states away until a federal task force finally put handcuffs on him in New Jersey, according to the U.S. Marshals Service. 47-year-old Curtis Cole of Camden, New Jersey was arrested this week and now faces extradition back to Connecticut to answer for a killing that happened back in June of 2021. This isn't a story about a manhunt that unfolds over one dramatic night. It's almost the opposite. A story about how long a case like this can stay open, how a task force built to chase fugitives across state lines actually operates, and what has to happen legally and procedurally before someone accused of murder in one state gets brought back to face a jury. By the end of this video, you'll know what officials have actually confirmed, what the charges against Cole mean under Connecticut law, and what's still genuinely unknown about how he was found. Let's start with what's actually on the public record, because in a case like this, the facts matter more than the drama. On June 6, 2021, Hamden police responded to a report of shots fired in the area of 20 Hamden Park Drive. When officers arrived, they found 38-year-old Jonquay Morrison suffering from gunshot wounds. Morrison later died from his injuries. Hamden police opened a homicide investigation that day, and according to the U.S. Marshals Service, that investigation continued through leads, through dead ends, through years, without a break significant enough to bring charges. That changed this past summer. On July 23, 2026, an arrest warrant was issued for Curtis Cole. The warrant charges him with murder, illegal discharge of a firearm, criminal possession of a firearm, carrying a pistol without a permit, and criminal possession of a pistol or revolver. Those are the charges as filed. Under Connecticut law, and under the presumption every accused person is entitled to, Cole is not guilty of any of them unless and until a jury decides otherwise. Everything from this point forward should be read with that in mind. This is what he's accused of, not what's been proven. I spent time going through how the marshals describe their own process in cases like this, and one detail stood out. The agency responsible for the Connecticut side of this case is the Connecticut U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force, a standing unit that works homicide and violent crime warrants specifically, not a one-off assignment. When that task force developed information that Cole was living in New Jersey, they didn't send their own agents. They issued what's called a collateral lead, essentially a formal handoff, to the U.S. Marshals New York/New Jersey Regional Fugitive Task Force, the unit with jurisdiction and local knowledge on the ground where Cole was believed to be. That's worth pausing on, because it's not how these searches are usually portrayed on screen. There's no single hero chasing a suspect across a bridge. It's an interstate bureaucracy built for exactly this purpose. One task force in one state formally handing a case to another in another state, because federal fugitive units are organized around jurisdiction, not around any one agent's initiative. The New York/New Jersey task force located Cole in Camden and took him into custody. According to the marshals, the arrest happened without incident. What's easy to miss if you only skim the headline. An arrest without incident after 5 years doesn't necessarily mean Cole was hiding in any dramatic sense. Public reporting hasn't indicated he was using a false identity, living off the grid, or actively evading law enforcement in the years between the shooting and the warrant. What's publicly confirmed is narrower than that. Hamden police investigated, a warrant was eventually issued in 2026, Cole was found to be in New Jersey, and he was arrested there. The gap between the 2021 shooting and the 2026 warrant is real and documented. What filled that gap, whether it was years of quiet investigative work, new evidence, a cooperating witness, or something else, hasn't been detailed in the public record as of this report. We're not going to guess at it, because guessing is exactly what a factual case shouldn't do. What strikes us about this case is less the arrest itself and more what it says about how these investigations are actually built to work over time. A homicide case doesn't close just because a break doesn't come in the first year, or even the first several years. Task forces like the one in Connecticut exist precisely because some warrants sit active for a long time before the right piece of information surfaces. A tip, a database match, a change in someone's circumstances that makes them easier to find. None of that is speculation about Cole specifically. It's a general description of why fugitive task forces are structured as permanent units rather than short-term investigations, and it's worth understanding as context for why 5 years later isn't actually unusual in cases like this. Now, to be clear about what's next procedurally, because this is where a lot of viewers lose the thread. Cole isn't simply going to be handed over to Connecticut. He's currently being held at the Camden County Sheriff's Office in New Jersey on a court-set bond of $3 million, and he's awaiting extradition. Extradition between states is a formal legal process. New Jersey has to agree, through its own court system, to release Cole into Connecticut's custody based on the warrant and the underlying charges. It's not automatic, and it's not instant. It typically involves a hearing in the state where the person is being held, a review of the warrant's validity, and in some cases the accused can contest extradition, which extends the timeline further. Only once that process concludes does Cole get transported to Connecticut to face arraignment on the actual charges. Let's talk about what murder actually means as a legal charge here, because it's a word that gets thrown around loosely in headlines and it deserves more precision than that. In Connecticut, a murder charge requires prosecutors to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the accused intentionally caused another person's death or caused it under circumstances the law treats as equivalent to intent. That's a high bar, deliberately so. The additional charges against Cole: illegal discharge of a firearm, criminal possession of a firearm, carrying a pistol without a permit, and criminal possession of a pistol or revolver are separate counts tied to the weapon itself, not to the killing directly. Prosecutors often file charges this way so that even if one count is harder to prove, others tied to firearm possession and use can still stand on their own evidence. None of that tells us anything about the strength of the evidence in this specific case. It's simply what the charges, as filed, legally require the state to prove. Now the take that'll probably split people watching this. A 5-year gap between a killing and an arrest warrant raises a real, fair question about how these cases get resourced. Is that 5-year wait a sign that violent cases like Morrison's stop getting sustained attention once the initial urgency fades? Or is it evidence the system is working as intended, patient, methodical, willing to keep a warrant alive until the facts support an arrest instead of rushing one? We don't think there's an obviously correct answer, and reasonable people watching this will land in different places. What do you think? Does a 5-year gap like this mean a system that gave up too early and just caught a break? Or a task force that never actually stopped working the case? We're genuinely curious how people watching this see it, because honestly, the public record doesn't tell us which one it was. It's also worth naming what we don't know, because a factual account has to be as clear about its gaps as it is about its confirmed facts. We don't know, from anything publicly released, what specific evidence connected Cole to the shooting. We don't know what led Hamden investigators or the Connecticut task force to focus on him specifically, as opposed to other possible leads that may have been pursued and closed out over the years. We don't know how investigators learned Cole was living in New Jersey, or how long that piece of information had been developing before the collateral lead was issued. And we don't yet know Cole's plea, or how his defense will respond to the charges once he's arraigned in Connecticut. None of that has happened yet as of this report. There's a detail in how the marshals describe their own fugitive recovery mission that's easy to skip past but says something real about how these cases work at scale. The agency runs task forces like this one in nearly every U.S. district, specifically built around locating people wanted on violent felony warrants who've crossed state lines, because state and local police departments generally don't have the jurisdiction, resources, or legal authority to pursue a suspect once they leave the state where the crime happened. That's the entire reason a federal agency sits in the middle of a case like this. Hamden police can investigate a Hamden homicide. They can't, on their own, make an arrest in Camden, New Jersey. That handoff, from local investigation to federal fugitive task force, is a structural feature of how American law enforcement is organized, not something unique to this case. Put yourself for a second in the position of a Hamden detective in the summer of 2021, working a fresh homicide with a grieving family wanting answers, knowing that if the person responsible leaves Connecticut, the case gets harder to close overnight. That's the reality behind a lot of cases that take years. Leads don't always dry up. More often, closing a case requires coordination across agencies, across state lines, and sometimes across years before every piece lines up enough to support a warrant that will actually hold up in court. So where does this actually stand right now, factually, as of this report? Curtis Cole has been arrested and charged, is being held in New Jersey on a $3 million bond, and is awaiting extradition to Connecticut. He has not been convicted of anything. The charges against him are allegations, and under the law, he's presumed innocent unless and until a Connecticut court finds otherwise. Jonquay Morrison, the man who died in that June 2021 shooting, is the person at the center of this case who no longer has a voice in it. Whatever comes next in a Connecticut courtroom will be about answering, formally and legally, what happened to him. There are details about the investigative timeline between 2021 and 2026 that simply haven't been made public yet. How the case moved, what evidence developed, when Cole specifically became a focus. If new documents or a court filing surface once he's arraigned in Connecticut, that's worth revisiting. If you'd want us to follow up once the extradition process plays out and Cole is formally arraigned, let us know. Cases like this often get more publicly documented once they reach a courtroom, and that's usually where the real evidentiary picture starts to come into focus. For now, what's confirmed is this: a Connecticut man was shot and killed in 2021. A federal task force built specifically to chase warrants like this one worked the case for years, and this week, 2 states and 1 interstate fugitive network away, an arrest was finally made. The rest, guilt, innocence, what actually happened on Hamden Park Drive that night, is now a question for a Connecticut courtroom, not for a headline.